All right, hello and welcome. This is Verge, and this is the return of the Version 4 podcast, and I have with me default friend, and a lot of you hate her, but yeah, hopefully we can fix that this time. You can say hi.
I hope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's try.
Let's work on it. So that's probably a good place to start. Why do you think people think why do you think you have the nickname Default Fed? Let's start off there.
I don't know, because I thought like a Fed was someone who said things that were like kind of like over the top offensive, and was like the kind of person who was like, hey, let's go out to the rally and I don't know, racial slurs or whatever, right? Like, but I'm sort of like boring that I don't understand.
Yeah, it is weird to me too. I mean, that is typically the Fed move, is to like instigate and then get people in like a honeypot of some sort. And then there's the alternative, like the other type of Fed, which is like get in the group chats and try to like get people to incriminate themselves in the group chats. Those are like the two classic modes of Fed. And then there's just like I call you a Fed because I'm mad at you Fed, which is also another classic type, which I think you're falling into that one.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if anything, I'm like, I realized yesterday that I was on another stream and someone said in the chat like, oh, you're just like a 90s lib. And I was like, yeah, I mean,
yeah,
sure.
I think you say that. I think you say that on Twitter too.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't understand. I guess I guess what people's problem is that attitude is what got us to the mess we're in today. So I'm in a sense no better than, and the other side doesn't think I'm like them enough.
Yeah, I can see that. But the weird thing is, though, you're not really like a political writer, though. So that's another thing that kind of throws it off, is because it's not like most of your content's political. You're just kind of adjacent to political people, you know?
I think like any time you talk about sex or relationships, it's like inherently political in this particular climate. Like 15 years ago, no, but today, certainly.
That is true, yeah. The I don't know, like it's the whole like gender discourse is permeated into everything. So consequently, yeah, even though you're just talking about relationships and just being like whatever, a former goth GF, now you've found yourself in NRX Twitter accidentally,
which is
very
so
strange.
Weird. I used to just be like post-rat tech Twitter, and then all of a sudden all these like neo-reactionaries hate me, and I'm like, how did you even find my account? Like, how did I get here? It's like I took a wrong turn.
So post-rat tech Twitter, I guess it's very similar. I think a lot of neo-reactionaries are techies.
That might be it.
I know, at least I know a lot of the ones I know are techies, but that could just because I like tech, so I could just be attracting those people. So they find you from post-rat Twitter, which also post-rat, I'm not really sure. Is that just sex work Twitter? That's what I've gathered.
I don't know what it is. They've sort of all like unfollowed me or like blocked me because they thought I was too like anti-sex work or something. So it's just like I'm like Twitter homeless.
Wait, are you anti-sex work? I feel like you talk about it a lot. That's not the impression I've gathered.
I'm like anti-sex work for everyone.
Okay.
Yeah,
can you elaborate?
I mean, my sense is that right now it's sort of a trend, and there's this sort of like implicit, if not often explicit, encouragement for girls to get into it, as though it's just like any old thing, any old experience. And I don't agree with that. I think that there are certain people who are equipped for sex work, and people assume this is an insult, but I think like it's a job that needs to be done. We're not getting rid of it. So if like someone like Ayla, right, is a sex worker, it's like she's all in. If she loves to do it, she seems to have the emotional resources for it, the support network, plenty of friends who are there for her. So like I would much rather see someone like Ayla be a sex worker than like some 18-year-old who's at Indiana University who thinks that it's, you know, a good way to make money and, you know, her ticket to glamour, when really it's probably not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, almost certainly not. Usually probably just going to cause problems ultimately. That's a very pragmatic, that's a practical. I mean, you're not going to get rid of it anyway, so you might as well have a practical response to it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I have to agree just on like practical grounds, because otherwise, I mean, like, yes, in theory, you want to be anti in general. Like, I want to be like draconian in that sense, but it doesn't actually work. So,
right, like it just may as well be people who are happy doing it. Yeah, like I certainly, like, if my future daughter wanted to be a sex worker, I would probably be pretty angry. I would be like, where did I go wrong, actually? But like, you know, if there's people out there who want to do it, it should be the people who volunteer, not the people who are trafficked into it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's things like this is why you probably catch ire, is because they'll have because NRX people, if there's anything, they're very galvanized in their positions. So for example, like the people who they would have the response like, oh, there's no people who volunteer to do it, they're all trafficked and or they're all what's it called, abused in some sense, or blah blah blah, right? So then that's why they would be like, it's all evil, which is fair. I mean, it is not like, it is fairly exploitative business, but there are always people who like choose exploitation for whatever their ultimate other like secondary motivation is. So yes, and I can see it, and even I catch ire from NRX Twitter. Not often. I don't know. They like me for some reason, but I do catch it.
You don't seem like the type, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's true. Well, you'd be surprised. As BAP says, the alt-right is mostly like not white people. And that's his thing. But it's fairly true. You'd be surprised how many of the anime abbeys are like just like rando, I guess, Italians.
Which is actually a good segue into another reason why right-wingers and even some left-wingers are kind of suspicious of me. I am a Jewess, so
yes, that doesn't help your case. That does not help your case at all. A Jewess, and you're talking about sex work. That's not great.
It's like asking for it.
Yeah, they do like the Jew girls, but yeah, no, not in this particular one. This particular topic is probably the one that they're most anti, I will say. They're typically a lot more flexible about anything but sex work. With sex work, they're like often very, very strongly opposed to it. But so what would you say? Like, I know you have like your advice column, and I don't care that much about relationships, even though I tweet about it a lot, so I don't read it, admittedly. But I feel like you seem to have very pragmatic, like normal advice in there from like what I've seen from excerpts. So what would you say, like, what is your advice? What is your, like, what would you say the crux of the core of your advice to women in the modern era might be?
Well, like, the one thing I find myself saying a lot is that, like, you can't use sex to engineer your way into a relationship, which I think like a lot of people think you can. A lot of women think you can. So like, I mean, it feels crass to say, even though I'll, write it 100 times, but like, you can't give someone like a really good blowjob and then have that be the thing that tips you into like girlfriend territory. Like, if you were going to be a girl, like you're just a good blowjob. So it's, and I think that if you look at a lot of the advice that people give, there's, again, it's like, implied, like, if you're really good in bed, then you'll win him over. But if he doesn't want to date you, he doesn't want to date you. And you're not going to fix that. So you may as well skip it, right? And save that stuff for the person who does want to date you. True.
That is true. There is definitely, at least in my experience, because I can mostly talk from my experience, it is often the woman who actually did not like hook up with you early that you end up dating anyway, which I found, like, experimentally, like just experientially, I've found this to be the case. My like longest girlfriend also explicitly, like, it was like one of her ideas, and it seems to have worked because she ended up being my girlfriend anyway. So, and in practice, I've seen other people also the same way. So I know there's like a big push to like be very sexually open, but in reality, people kind of have this state. If it's too easy to acquire, no one's that invested, you know?
Yeah,
like you don't have to wait like 5-10 dates, but like, you know, day one's probably not the
date one is usually, that's like not the move.
Yeah.
I don't buy that you have to wait a month or wait 3 months or something, but yeah, date one's too soon. You know, I think you could make out or something date one, but it's also like usually like, I don't know. I think if a guy's asking date one, that's also kind of a red flag to you as a woman.
I feel like you have to ask. That's the thing, is you have to ask. You can't say like asking is not implying anything beyond that. I just got to know. I don't think it's unfair to ask. You know, especially when you're on an app, you gotta like, if you don't ask, you never find out. Because sometimes they don't want that. You'd be surprised who wants to hook up and who doesn't.
You know, I've heard that before. I've heard from like,
you'd be really surprised.
Male friends who want to wait. They're like, oh yeah, I like scared this girl away because she thought I didn't like her because I didn't try to hook up with her after the first date. Yeah,
it is very much the case that, especially if you're in an app, even if like all conversations are non-sexual and there's implications of a dating, you'd be surprised a lot of girls are like still just trying to hook up. It's just that the overt sexuality isn't like their move. You know, it's not really a girl thing to be into that. It's actually a little bit of a red flag, actually, that you're probably getting trapped, if you know what I mean, if they're very explicitly sexual. But to be fair, most of the listeners here, they're either literally married or they're complete incels. So let's talk about the incel problem here on the internet, because all my married friends who listen are they typically don't have a problem. They're usually Chads, and you know their wives are very attractive. So even I get called an incel often. I'm literally, before I got on here, being harassed by a girl who's calling me an incel, which is just fun.
Why?
It's actually not true.
I mean, is like incel just a catch-all for like misogynist? So, you know, like when people mean,
I believe
I'm not calling
so.
you one.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. Online misogyny, I think, is incel, but people legitimately think, women do often think I am a real incel, even though none of my takes are particularly misogynistic. Even when they are, they're like either explicitly a joke tone, or they're so common sense that I don't know, it's only misogyny because it's 2021. But yeah, the incel problem. This is real. There's our graph recently. Like 30-ish% of men under 30 have not had sex in the past couple of years and are likely virgins from the data set, from what it implied. So this is a real problem. What do you think is like the impetus of this problem?
I mean, I would buy that a lot of it is the apps. I mean, I think there's different flavors of incel, and there's different reasons for it. But I think the most basic reason is, and I say this with as much compassion as possible, and I'm going to preface this with, I'm not making a value judgment on my own appearance by saying this. But I think a lot of people are just like, are straight up like kind of ugly and like don't take good photos. And if, you know, there's something kind of pornographic about apps where you're working on these most base instincts. So you're just not gonna, like, you probably could have gotten laid if people were still going to bars. And you probably could have gotten a girlfriend, but women are like inclined to flake, and then they're like double inclined to flake on people they're not attracted to. And they can't, they never get the opportunity to be attracted to you in this more holistic way.
It is true. I mean, like, continue. I
was just the other thing is like, I do think there is, and I don't know how widespread this is. I know it's at least somewhat real. Like, men are also kind of like delusional about like, one, women liking them, and then two, like who they could get, you know, like,
this is true.
I understand like shooting your shot, but like you have to, you know, I would never like in a million years think I could date like a male model or someone equivalent, right? Like, I kind of know what my own limitations are. And I feel like many men will like, it's, you know, one thing to ask her out, but then to like be like, well, you know, is she gonna date me? Probably not, you know, like.
Yes. But here's the problem though. Being overconfident does get you some like it's like Pokemon. I have an article that I wrote about it, where it's like you could throw a ball at a really rare catch and actually get it, even though statistically you really shouldn't, from being overconfident. And especially like in weird things with like models in particular, because like a lot of models are very insecure because in high school they were just tall geeky girls, and then they kind of glowed up. So you could surprise people we all have like one story of like this girl had no reason to date me whatsoever, and she still did. So this kind of overconfidence, even though it doesn't work, it does kind of work sometimes. But this delusion can spiral out of control, especially for men who don't have successful women, seeing the overconfidence and then kind of creating a feedback loop in their own head, which keeps them from, meeting people.
Right. Like, how much of the incel problem is like out of control standards?
Yes.
I think it's probably less. I actually think it might be less. It's a big, maybe like a fourth or something. It's like not as much as people think, but probably significant enough.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Well, I was combining like too much pornography and like changing what you think women's supposed to look like as part of the out of control standards thing in my head, because like, you can even see it in the way the female women like look in pop culture now. There's like a convergence of like the pornographic aesthetic and like the Instagram aesthetic, which kind of is just converging on, and then like the trans aesthetic is all kind of converging on this like similar hyper surgery plastic kind of pornographic vibe. And I think that a lot of it, and there's always been like a fake look to like, celebrities, but I think this one in particular, only like the current like Nicki Minaj energy, Kardashians and stuff like that look legitimately fake. They don't look like real people anymore. I think that is only possible because of like porn addiction and stuff. And I think part of that, and if you get used to that, seeing like a normal person, like you see how many people get mad about makeup, for example, like you start to, that kind of discourse wouldn't happen if people weren't so, I don't know, desensitized because of like porn and stuff like that.
I would think that like porn probably is more of an effect once you're in a relationship though, right? Like how many people, like how many incels, right, are like not going to date a woman because like they haven't dated anyone, they haven't had sex with anyone in, let's say, years, right? And then they get an opportunity and she's like a little bit fat or something. How many of them are going to say no because of that? If they've been
no, definitely not.
Yeah,
but they won't get that far. Is the thing. That's what the whole like no fat movement's like. You'd be surprised, like because it kills your libido, and also you like find when you're like single and you're a male and you're like using a lot of pornography, it kills your libido, and you also don't find as many women attractive as you otherwise would. So it's like dampening. It's a lot of inertia. You don't get started.
Can you like reverse it? Like you can go on like without like no fap, right? Like if you met someone, right? Will it like slowly, if you stop using porn and start going on dates?
Oh yeah, 100%. The technically speaking, the no fap thing is no fap to porn. People just do the whole full no fapping because it gives you like this spiking testosterone and you feel like, but yeah, really just stopping porn is the part that does it. And yeah, relationship and like no porn would, not desensitize you. But I do know it apparently has problems in relationships. I don't know from experience though. So
that's a good disclaimer to add.
Yeah, right. I got to make sure, any girls are in my DMs. I got to make sure that if they're listening to this, I am only talking about my followers, not about myself. Thank you. And my clock fell. That's crazy. But okay, so you're thinking porn in a relationship. So I know you also talk about how like you like to talk about how men on the internet like to over exaggerate like the, I don't know, like the female privilege in the dating market. That's another big thing I know I hear you speak about, which is interesting because you might be the only person online who does it with some kind of empathy towards incels, because typically if they're doing that, it's like, yeah, it's still ugly guys are kind of excluded entirely. So can you like elaborate on what your opinions on that might be?
I kind of, all right, with the exception of like markets like New York, LA, probably Miami, I kind of agree with the incel notion that women are competing for the top men. So it creates the illusion that they're being discarded because they're only going for, the top tier. I do think there's like a type of woman who is so unattractive for whatever reason, be it her age, her appearance, her weight, who does get that same treatment from like so-called lower tier men. So, like they're not femcells, but they're like scraping at the bottom of the barrel. So they get frustrated with like the incel rhetoric. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of coping going on though with women, especially online. Like this, I see a lot of people say like they're hot and, they get sort of like top treatment, and you can kind of get, they probably don't. And I don't really understand what the delusion is and like what it does for girls. That might be my own bias. I feel like I started my dating life in New York City. So like that's
a bad start there.
It was yikes. So that kind of gave
for
me
girls,
like,
it's pretty brutal in New York City.
It's awful. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. I have girlfriends who are like,
for men, I would recommend it. I would highly recommend it for a dude. But
I would recommend
very
it.
Bad for women.
It's terrible for women, unless you're really good looking, and in which case, even then it'll be hard. But you give it a shot.
You might find a billionaire accidentally.
Yeah.
But you have to be like really hot, yeah. But yes, but continue. Sorry.
So weirdly, I'm kind of agreeing with incels. I'm just zooming in on the experience of, as incels so eloquently put it, getting pumped and dumped. But women like really don't know. They don't like they'll meet a so-called like chat on a dating app, and they think he really likes them, and there's these like advice networks like between mother and daughter, or just like magazine articles that make any sense don't exist anymore. And so they feel like, oh, all men are trash. No, not all men are trash. It's the guy who you were like really quick to discard because he was like a little awkward after one date. He'd probably treat you a lot better than the guy who slept with you and then ghosted you and then breadcrumbed you and then whatever, came back, left again. It's an easy mistake to make, but like you gotta learn after a certain point.
After a certain age, it's kind of like, it's kind of your fault though, I'm gonna be honest. Like not you in particular, but after a certain age of like, in any realm, like not just dating or like not just women and chads and whatever, you have to start to like pick under, like, put together the pieces of like, maybe my actions aren't, leading to the outcome I want. So there's something wrong with my actions, like an agency thing. Totally. Taking accountability.
Hope is the last thing that dies with so many people, especially in dating. And like, a lot of women will do all sorts of mental acrobatics to justify why a guy like actually likes them, even though all signs point to they don't. I think this is probably another way in which I'm just like a 90s lib, because a lot of my advice like really isn't that different than like, women are from Venus, men are from Mars. He's just not that into you. Those books were right.
They were right. Yeah, a lot of the lib culture definitely did lead us down this path, but at the same time, like I really hate to be like the end of history thing. My man Fukuyama was right. That was kind of like the last stages of like actual common sense reality. And not that men and women are like so categorically different, but the differences that exist are legitimate, and there is a gulf that is kind of unbridgeable between the two, and you have to understand. And now you can translate it. Like I try my best. My goal on the internet, in my persona's verse, is to like translate social behavior for autists, because I've always been the only socially competent person. As I studied math, studied programming. I was always like the only person with any social skills in any of my classes, and like I would like bring my weird friends to parties and stuff. So my goal is to translate some of these things and translate womanese into autistic male speak. And this also makes me look like an insane misogynist sometimes, but it's good. It's fine. It's for the culture. And consequently, I do think that once we started down the Cosmo Sex and the City path, like really Sex and the City was kind of like, well, I feel like the actual like stake in the ground of when things started to get real bad, because you start to glamorize what used to be actively a shoot, not just because it was like trying to hate on women for being like a shrew, but like because it's not there's no happiness really in that lifestyle that was portrayed and marketed to older women in New York City, and then ultimately everyone else. But it sells magazines, it sells shoes, it sells expensive apartments, and that's why it caught on.
I actually think Sex and the City was a satire.
Probably, but
yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's like read as it's you know, it's read as, oh wow, like this is really cool. I want to model my life after this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Machiavelli was allegedly a satire, but I don't really think it was. But we don't really know anymore, because after a while, satire becomes reality.
Yeah.
Famous example is the South Park episode that I think now would probably never be played again. With the dolphin, where Mr. Garrison, I can't remember the names that well, wants to be a dolphin. It's a trans parody, and there's like a whole episode about him trying to do surgeries to become a dolphin. And now, when I show any clip from that episode, it's like immediate issues. I'm like scared of getting banned, but it was on TV, and people used to understand it was satire. But anyway,
yeah, that's a whole other. Yeah,
it's a whole other bag of worms.
I know what you mean.
But yeah. But the idea is that things that were satirical become reality very quickly. Is the thing. That's my point ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. No questions.
Mm-hmm. So all right. So women are in this. Well, not just women, men and women, but you're here, so it's women are in the state of crisis because they were sold this cosmopolitan dream here that doesn't really work on any, like you can't have it all really, just fundamentally that's just how life works. You can't have it all. And here you are trying to bridge the gap for millennials. I imagine, I feel like it's probably mostly millennials who follow you.
Yeah.
Yes. And you have in your life experiences give you some kind of like bridge, because you said you were married before. I know that. And now you're vibing doing something else, and you're trying to help out the tech world. And
I don't know.
We're living.
But I don't know about the tech world. But I mean, you know, I am in tech, so that's somehow, you know, I also live in the Bay Area, so that mixes in techies just naturally sort of end up in my orbit.
So do you have to deal with the poly Burning Man crowd? Is that like that you don't run into those?
I somehow I like managed, you know, there were a couple of people who were sort of like that, who tried to like befriend me or like date me or whatever, and I was so sort of like Twitter brained and autistic, I scared them away.
Smart.
And after
That's
that,
good.
that was the end of that.
that was for the best. Okay, so you didn't have to. So what would you say is the difference between like the West Coast dating scene and like New York City, right? New York City is notoriously bad for women. Is San Francisco? Is there any hope?
Geez, they're both really bad for different reasons.
Okay,
San
cool.
Francisco it's sort of like zombie land right now because everyone's leaving California. But San Francisco was like what Manhattan is for women, for men.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. No girls. So then,
like,
you're just scrambling to like get a relationship.
Yeah, it's just like I also feel like people, you know, girls are really flaky. They lead you on. Oh, there's lots of like leading, like soft and more explicit, like leading guys on, just keeping guys in your orbit.
Yes,
which
that
I
is
can
classic.
Like, yeah, I can understand that like at first when you're like, oh shit, I have all this power. But you know, when you're getting into people who've lived there like a decade, it's sort of like chill out. You know?
Oh, yeah. Leading on is one of the most infuriating things that women do, and it is. And flaking for me is the worst. But those are brutal. I would liken them to pump and dumping, and just like. It is because of how much investment you, as a man, you have to put into any relationship. Yeah, I know there are like stories of like Chads like balancing plates of like 5, 6, 10, whatever men and women, but that's like a full-time job at that point. It's like all your energy goes into managing that because it takes a lot of output to pull that off, right? And then there's like the CEO type who might literally have an assistant who manages that for them, right? But the average person really can't. Even just dating some casual girl off Tinder requires a lot of energy. I have to like figure out a date. I have to plan it, blah, blah, blah. I have to organize schedules. She's going to flake on me. So I have to plan multiple dates on the same day with different people. It's like there's at least a 60% chance she's flaking. So I literally have to make plans for something else to do on a day of a date. It's brutal. Anyway. So do you think there's hope for a modern dating scene, or do you think millennials are screwed?
Okay, so this is what I can't seem to figure out. In my dating life has been pretty, even though I got divorced, and I had like a rocky start in New York, it's been pretty normal. Once I sort of got my bearings again, it was fine. Everyone who's like really close to me is what I call romantically normal. But then like I can observe that other people aren't, and I don't know what makes like me and some of my closer friends and my family different than people kind of out there. And I know people are actually suffering because I'm getting all these emails. I'm trying to give advice. You see it on Twitter, you see it in other forms of media. So I don't really know, and I don't know how exaggerated the problem. I mean, surely that's pretty bad, based on recorded statistics. It's just hard to tell. So I don't know if we can have hope, right? Because I can't tell. Yeah,
that's fair. It is also a little bit more. The millennials are a little gray area. Like I have friends who are married. I have friends who can't find girls ever. Friends who like only hook up. So it's like, yeah, it is maybe millennials more gray area. But what's your take on the Zoomers? Because you see like trad energies. You see the trad thing online. I personally think it's kind of fake. I don't think trads exist, especially not Zoomers. If anyone's going to be trad, get the fuck out of here. But what is your take on the Zoomer question?
I think we're going to have a lot of miserable Zoomers, but I think younger Zoomers probably are going to be a little bit more sex negative, a little bit more, not trad. You're right. Like straightforwardly trad is kind of fake, but a little bit more conservative. A lot of my friends in sort of like the 18 to 24 age bracket, are, even if they have had a lot of casual sex, they're kind of reining it in, and they're like, this is, not good for my soul, and I don't want to do this anymore. I had a long talk with a friend of mine who's, I think she's just 20, and she was saying how like she only wants to be, she's had casual sex and it pains her that she has, and she doesn't want to do that anymore. And it's not the first time I've heard something like that.
Yeah, I do hear a lot more of a real big pushback about it for younger women. It's not, and men too, actually. And it's definitely different because obviously like Tinder was, and online dating was prevalent through the entirety of my dating history from like literally day one. So it's always felt fairly quote unquote normal, but in reality, it is a more, the hyper casual sex is definitely more of like a enigma. It's more of like a millennial thing. And I do see, and I want the Zoomers to have their meaningful relationships, but at the same time, they still suffer from the same problems we have to suffer from, of like large amounts of competition from, because of like social media and stuff. Especially now that girls are like really, really good at manipulating photos and like looking like models. And that is, unfortunately, not good news for men, because most of us just really don't know how to do that, or like it's really also hard to get a following in general. Even if you're like, you have to be fairly charismatic, and the kind of person who's charismatic enough to get a following probably didn't have problems dating to begin with. In my experience, I mean, it's not always the case, but so I don't know. I do think that they still, even if they desire more of a more traditional, standard relationship, they might have even worse of a time. Like they have TikTok, for example, and girls get millions of followers in high school, and that can't be great for dating.
Yeah, I mean, although like millennials had like MySpace angles, though. I mean, I guess it's different.
True,
right?
but like how the person I know the MySpace like had the most followers, like 5,000, like if a girl in your school can dance on TikTok and get hundreds of thousands of followers, and men offering to fly her to like LA, that's kind of brutal. It's like, oh, I wanted to take her to prom. I guess not. But
yeah, I mean, how common do you think that is, though? Is that just like the top 1%, or like, do you think the average, just like 18 to keep it safe, 18-year-old is getting all of these offers from really top tier, like guys, just simps, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Simps, I think, are really common. I think the flying you out of LA or Dubai is really top 1%, but I think top 10%, top 20% could probably get several thousand followers worth of simps. I don't think it requires like that much to get that. Like I always joke that you get a free 5K followers on Twitter for being a woman.
It's
which
true.
Is fairly true. I don't know that many girls who have less than that, unless they're actively trying to stay away and like stay private.
It's also like TikTok's a hack to talk about dating. Like
true.
You'll just
or taking selfies.
I don't even think that's you'll just blow up though if you talk about romance at all as a woman, regardless of where you fall on the spectrum. Yes. That's like a follower hack.
This is true. That is true. It's like dudes in crypto. If you start getting followers for no reason, put crypto in your title and you get a few thousand. Yes. And while it might not be every girl, because it's definitely impossible to say that every girl is getting this many followers for being attractive or just being online, it's enough that it skews perceptions for younger people, right? The notion that, maybe you don't get 10,000 followers for being hot, but like you might have 1,000 Instagram followers, and that does change, even if they're all in your network or like in like locally, right? They're all people from your college or high school. That does, increase competition into a large extent at a level that just didn't exist before. Like it used to be common before all of this, like even when I was in high school, and probably you too, where there was always like the hot girl who never got asked to prom because there was no smartphones. Like smartphones showed up my senior year of high school. So it wasn't like girls were getting hella DMs and they knew they were super hot. Like there was a girl who was literally a model and like no one asked her out. And it was just because she was like, awkward girl, right? And, a couple of years later, she became a Ford model and she literally just became a model. But the transition from pre to post smartphone changed a lot of things, and I just don't think that would happen in school now.
That might be true. It's hard to gauge. I mean, it also, like, when in my high school, it wasn't even about like being hot. It was about like being skinny. So there was like very beautiful, like kind of chubby girls, or like not even chubby, just like average sized, who, were totally off limits. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, with regard to like following, skewing your perception of like the normie guys around you. I mean, think about the kind of messages that like simps are sending, and like why would you be comparing that attention to like what a real person could give you? Like there's some, like it's not as though it's always like a 54-year-old guy, or like a kind of like crusty anime av or something. And on TikTok, it's like I don't know what the DM scene is like on TikTok. I'm sure it's not that like what's his face, Bryce Hall. I don't even know if that's actually his name. This like very beautiful teenage like TikTok influencer. So he's not the one who's like sliding into these girls' DMs, right? It's all these like like in some cases like actually quite creepy weirdos.
This is true. I can't imagine DMs from women's DM boxes look particularly nice. But I will say, like, I've had experiences like using women's Tinders and stuff like that, and like looking at like females' profiles, and it is a lot of creepy guys, but there are like legit, genuine people in there that are very often passed up for arbitrary reasons. Like, I was recently using a friend's Tinder, and I was showing her like really good, like attractive people, right? Who were like nice and sweet to her in DMs, or like had like a funny opening. It was just some weird, like, no, for an arbitrary reason that didn't make sense to me. So I would, yeah, I mean, like, the bad always, the extremes always kind of overshadow everything else. But I don't know. I do think that there's definitely no precedent to the amount of attention that people are getting now. And
sure, there's no precedent to the amount of rejection.
True. Yeah, that is also true. Yeah. You didn't get rejected the way people get rejected now, or to the extent.
Yeah, I mean,
because how many girls can you really ask out?
Right. Well, okay. So I will say this: when I was in New York, I got so like dehumanized and like so consistently rejected that like I totally understand how people become like extremist incels. I was like on some femcel shit. I wasn't leaving my apartment. It was just like. I was like reinterpreting Plato to like, I mean, it was just like weird. I don't even know how my brain got so destroyed. Oh my God. But like rejection really does some like, and it has to be a lot, right? Like 1, 2, 3 times can fuck someone up, but it's like if every single person I have like so much compassion for men where like every attempt they've ever made, it's already scary. And then it's every single one they're like laughed at, ignored. No, I'm kind of mean to know it. Jesus, like what's the alternative? You need something to keep you afloat, and just like the sea of pain. Not to be so dramatic about it, but it's crazy.
No, but no, it feels that dramatic. It definitely feels that dramatic. So I can't. I don't think that's even exaggerating. Like
my Zoom got messed
up. Am I gone?
Yeah, you're still there. All right.
No. Oh yeah. It doesn't. It feels that dramatic though. Like I can't even say, cause some of the stories I get from people in DMs. Cause I am like older brother of the incels. Some of the stories I get are pretty brutal in my DMs. But then I'm like, and that's insane. Cause I have also pretty mortifying stories, and I'm not even like extreme levels of. I haven't even experienced extreme levels of rejection. Just like standard male rejection and a few horror stories. And even still, I had like 2 years where I was like, I'm not talking to anyone. So it's tough. And you need to have some kind of tether, like some kind of reinforcement that you're like worthy enough to keep dating for a lot of men, or most people in general need that.
I think for women too, I think women get like super bitter. I mean, anyone does. Yeah, it's hard. Dating is really painful, and we're encouraged not to take it seriously and not to take it personally. How could you not take it personally?
Yeah, someone's making a legit value judgment about you as a person, even though, yeah, you go to therapy or something, and they're like, it says more about them than it says about you. You're like, I don't know. I'm getting a lot of the same opinion here.
Yeah, it sucks. It's the most personal kind of rejection that exists.
Mm-hmm. So we don't blackpill too much. You have your podcast After the Orgy. What's the deal with that? Because the title is causing also a lot of controversy there too. You're stoking the flames of the anorexia. I see the quote tweets. I'm like, oh my God, what is she doing now?
Oh no, I don't even. They must have me blocked or something, or they must be private accounts. So I don't see it.
Oh yeah,
thank God,
no,
probably
a lot.
Oh God, you got to send me some screenshots sometime. Yeah, After the Orgy, it's a quote it's from a quote that my co-host picked. But we're basically going through like what went so wrong between like 2008 and 2014.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. That's basically what we're all trying to figure out. Because
yeah.
Okay, so then the title is a little bit incendiary, but it gets some attention. What's so far what's your take? What's your high level take on this? Abstract.
So super high level, I think like, God, it sounds so silly, like saying it so reductively, but I think social media had an impact that is really underestimated. I don't think it's academia. I really believe that, like Tumblr, for example, like Tumblr and the degradation of journalism had a really big impact on a lot of the cultural changes we're seeing. I mean, there's all sorts of like economic reasons and whatever, but a lot of like, it cannot be understated how terrible it was for like the Tumblr to, or like the something awful to Tumblr to Vice /Bustle/Bust/whatever pipeline.
Tumblr has had a bigger influence than people give it credit for. Literally all of the things that people are rebelling against socially right now were on Tumblr.
Totally. I mean, anything right now that feels like a freak show of our times, there's like a Tumblr post from, like 2010 where it's like, oh, this is a joke. These are only people online.
And and then here they are. That the real radicalization happened on Tumblr. As you've heard it here first. People were talking about 4chan and the radicalization there, and I'm telling you right now, 4chan is mostly people crying, and this is bad words, but it's mostly people crying with pet base. they're just sad that they don't have any girlfriends, and they're trying to improve their life. There's not anything radical on 4chan. As someone who's been on it since like 2007, Tumblr, however, they be wilding out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that a lot of stuff that it's like, weird theory through like the Tumblr looking glass is now like becoming public policy.
Yeah. And basically. So then, and Tumblr, I guess, kind of culled it by getting rid of porn, which is also interesting that Tumblr died the second they took the porn off. There's much to think about there, much to consider. But what do you think we can do to push back, right? Like, I don't think you can't obviously put Pandora back in the box, but how do we return to normalcy? You think that's possible?
I mean, no, I do think we're going to I don't think we'll ever return back to normalcy. But I do think some of the more extreme expressions will go away, especially because it's like, there's also like a lot of body modification going on that I think, I mean, I wouldn't trust a 16 to 24-year-old to make a major life decision. So even think about just like the proliferation of like tattoos. Tattoos are super normalized. Think of how much regret like people who have like tons of piercings and tattoos will have at like 31, 32, like right when like age is really starting to show up. And then they'll, teach their children, if they have children, like, you shouldn't do this. I mean, you even see people from the 90s who are kind of in like these alt scenes say like, I kind of wish that someone had told me not to do it.
I do often run into that when I was hanging out in like the metal scene. I was like, just be normal.
Yeah.
I have no tattoos because fortunately I was told, but this is delay, so I can't tell if you're responding or not. But okay. I also have the tattoo thing is brutal with the body mods. It's true, and I think there's definitely going to be a regret. And I think you're right about that. There's going to be some kind of counterculture response. I do think that. I mean, it's already kind of starting. That everyone's very like sex negative and what have you, or you're seeing it more often. And like there's a reason why cottagecore and trad are like the aesthetics. Like even when you see people who don't explicitly talk about like being trad, cottagecore is becoming like the actual like girl aesthetic online. So there's that's like the second layer of the sex negative response to some degree.
It's also and I don't know if this is just because of the corner of Twitter I hang out in, and again, like the various ways it's poisoned my brain. But it doesn't seem like it's a little bit passe now to be like super sex positive. Someone sent me like a new magazine that's like super like sex centric, and it seems like, because it also has to do with like millennials aging. It's like such a millennial thing, and now millennials are kind of becoming, you know, Gen X-y, right? So it feels kind of like,
yeah, we're old. No, it definitely feels passe, but you're also in and I'm starting to notice it more and more. The NRX Twitter is pushing a lot of culture way more than we think that we are. Like, I'm noticing things. Anyway, I'm not gonna start like jerking myself off here, but I'm noticing more things downstream of our Twitter conversations than I used to. Notably the Godzilla Kong movie. You see things on Joe Rogan being talked about that, like, I know for a fact were talked about between mutuals on Twitter, or like there's guests on who were citing zero HP Lovecraft threads and stuff like that. So you'll go, oh, okay, wait a second, there's more impact here than we think.
Oh, totally. I mean, I even think that I'm so sorry for all this noise. I'm in Miami and it's just like planes, Ferraris.
Yeah,
vibe. But you know, like, I predicted this wave of sex negativity, and then it was basically like a couple of tweets thrown onto a Substack that was in the New York Times. Like, I think even by me predicting that, I'm helping create it. Mm-hmm. You know, whether I want it or not.
Yes, it's true. It's very true. Yeah, while, you know, they started pushing people out of mainstream discourse because of, you know, what weird political neolib thing that they were doing. And then they consequently, as a consequence of that, they created a subculture of, like, you know, rejects, and that became what's cool. And even though it doesn't seem like we're just joking around, to a large extent, we're accidentally influencing popular culture, which is, you know, the way things go.
I mean, you'd be surprised who is lurking a lot of these threads, or like who's in, you know, people's DMs. A lot of rich people like are like, you know, they themselves may not be, you know, based, as it were, but like they view it like, oh wow, you know, this is some cool new thought. I mean, look at Curtis Yarvin.
Yeah, shout out to Mark Andreessen. Oh yeah, Moldog. Shout out to Mark Andreessen, who follows me now. And I swear to God, if I see a character of me in his movies, we're gonna start, you know, I need some kind of royalty or something. But anyway, continue. Sorry, Curtis Yarvin.
Yeah, I mean, well, a lot of powerful people. And I don't think it was just because he had a cool startup, right? A lot of really important people who do have the power to influence the culture were reading Unqualified Reservations.
That is very true. Yeah, now he's like almost a normie celeb. It's kind of crazy. I hear people talk about Moldbug all the time now. I feel almost personally offended that Moldbug is becoming normal and he's on like everyone's podcast. It was super edgy when I was first talking about him. Now, like, my friends who's like, you know, programmer shitlib in Austin is like quoting Moldbug back to me. I'm like, I told you to read him in 2011, and you were like, oh, what is this incel stuff? So I don't know. But okay, so I think we've covered a lot of it. We've covered why you're not a Fed, right? You're just a girl online talking about the internet and relationships, right? So you guys can stop harassing her. If she turns out to be a Fed, we're gonna delete this episode. But she's a Fed. And then we have dating's hard. What else? Is there any last minute things we need to cover before, so that the internet knows to leave you alone? I mean, obviously, keep following her. Follow her, all of her stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
stop harassing.
Please, I mean, look, if you think I'm worth saving, why don't you send me I'm willing to change my views, right? And I think that maybe also like looking inconsistent is part of the Fed aura. But I mean, like, and I won't say what it was. It might be easy to find. I said something kind of bold and it went like semi-viral in our corner of Twitter. And then someone in like probably an NRX person in a not abrasive, not rude way was like, this is why you're wrong. And I was like, then I fact checked it on my own. I was like, yeah, all right. I concede. I was wrong. And in fact, thank you for telling me, because I would have kept believing this. So if you think I'm worth saving, please, I invite you to evangelize your your perspective to me in public if
go.
that feels safer.
I like that. That's and also to be fair, guys. You don't want girls who are completely. This is to be sexist for a second. Women online who are completely ideologically consistent, they're actual feds. By the way, that's not real. They're not. That's not a thing online. So it is pathology to be completely ideologically consistent. And yeah, I think that's a good place to end. What anything to plug? We've plugged all your things, but anything else you would like to plug there, DF?
I think you've got it. My Substack, my Twitter, and After the Orgy, my podcast, which is not as provocative as the title might suggest.
Fair. That's fair. Well, I appreciate you coming on. This has been fun. And yeah, well, I'll see you around, right?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Of course.